The 2020 NFL schedule is out, and it's Listener Questions Live on Friday here on the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Cincy Jungle network of podcasts. How's everybody doing? Happy Friday. If you're still able to track what day of the week it actually is during this lovely lockdown time around the world, I'm Anthony Cosenza. Hope you all are doing well. Joined by John Sheeran. John, what's going on, my man?
Nothing much. I guess last night was a palooza of news for the circumstances. So I guess that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and we will be joined shortly by Matt Minich, who runs the Chalk Talk episodes on the network, among other podcast episodes. So we're looking forward to having him join us. Thank you for joining us as well. We're going to start with the schedule breakdown, and then we're going to transition into listener questions from there. So you've still got some time to get in touch with us, to leave your questions. You can leave them in the live chats, whether it's Facebook or the live YouTube channel. You can leave them there. You can also get them to us on the Cincy Jungle comment thread. Get them there. And you can also get them to us, call or text 949-542-6241. Email the obinsider@gmail.com. And, of course, Twitter at Bengals OBI. So get those to us however you can. We'll be getting to those in just a little bit. So hit us up. The schedule came out, John, 2020 NFL schedule. Some interesting tidbits to it. I guess the first place to start before we kind of talk about potential wins, losses, interesting games. 3 primetime games, so to speak, right? There's a Thursday night football game. Very early in the season, much like it was in 2018 when the Bengals in week 2 took on the Baltimore Ravens on Thursday night football. Week 2 is a game at the Cleveland Browns on Thursday night football. Short week there. There is a Monday night football game at the end of the year on December 21st. So you've got that. And I guess the other one isn't really necessarily prime time. It is week 1. It's the season opener, but they start late because they are playing a West Coast team in the Midwest. The Los Angeles Chargers week 1 at 4:05 Eastern. So I guess there's 2 true primetime games. Mm-hmm. And then that one, because of the late start, you can kind of say, well, it's not your traditional 10 a.m./1 p.m. start, however you want to look at it. How do you think that the narratives will be changing about the Bengals in primetime this year, or are they still a year or two away, especially with the games they have slated, 2 divisional games? Do you think that they're a year or two away from maybe turning the tide of that narrative?
I think it just depends on how they play. They may not win either game, but I think the narrative was that they've always just fell on their faces and made it just completely abysmal, embarrassing performances. They have a chance to win both these games because on the surface, I mean, the Browns and Steelers aren't exactly world beaters, but they're just teams that in recent years have gotten the better of the Bengals. Like we talked about before the show, Bengals haven't beaten the Steelers in literally half a decade. They haven't won a game against the Steelers since 2013 in that Monday night game when Giovanni Bernard kind of went off in one of his debuts as a rookie back then. But I guess you can kind of treat that Browns game like a true primetime game. I know people don't all the time think of a Thursday night game as like a true primetime game, but that's going to be Joe Burrow's first game under the lights. Everyone's going to be watching that in a division game in a hostile environment on the road. I think it's going to be difficult for just the whole team to like in his first road start. It's going to be 4 days after his debut. So right. That's going to add a tougher layer to that situation. But, you know, they could win that game, but it's not an easy game. You can't just think of it as the Browns and think, you know, they're going to win. They've only won one game against the Browns in the past 3 years, or 2 years, excuse me. And, you know, the Steelers Monday night, Sunday night, that they seem to always have a primetime game against them, regardless of the quality of the teams. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is there. Like they've shown the propensity to just beat the Bengals into submission, or if they're close, they end up closing the games against the Bengals. So, you know, the changing of the narrative can start this year, and maybe you see some slight growth in that regard. I don't think you look at Joe Burrow and think this guy freezes under the lights because he did it in college.
Right.
But I mean, it's different in the NFL, and he has to prove that he can translate that. So he's going to get a chance. But even if they don't win, you know, either game or both games, I think it depends more about how well they perform from an overall process standpoint.
Is there a Myles Garrett suspension still in play at that point from last year? Is that bleeding? I meant to research that and I did not. I don't know if that's bleeding over or not. But if it is, that may play a factor into that game too.
I think so. The first thing comes up is that they ended his indefinite suspension, and I guess he was just they called it indefinite because they didn't want to put a number on it, but I think they wanted to suspend him for a certain amount of time. And I think
right.
I guess he's however many games he missed last year that he was suspended for. I think that might be his punishment. I'm not seeing anything coming up regarding to it going into this year. He was reinstated by the NFL in February after his indefinite suspension, but I'm not seeing anything regarding him missing the first game.
Yeah, Ken Fetcher in the live Facebook said he's been reinstated, so I thought I had heard that, but didn't know if that was playing a factor into it. I'm going to bring in the third member of our party, Matt Minich. Matt, how you doing, buddy?
Good. How you doing?
Good. We got antsy. We got started just about a minute or so without. hope that's all right, buddy. But, good to have you with us. I know we switched up the time a little bit, a couple of times on you, but glad you were able to make it with us. Talk some schedule. Your timing was actually pretty good because we were just talking about the first part of the schedule and the prime time facet of the schedule, and obviously the narratives that surround the Cincinnati Bengals in that venue.
Mm-hmm.
What do you? I guess just kind of starting with that Browns game, your initial reaction to that, especially with it coming so early in the season and on such short. Those games come usually on short rest anyway, but.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be an important game for the Bengals, and it's coming on short rest early in the season. Browns probably thinking they have a lot to prove after what they did last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the first game of the year you have the most time for. Assuming and put this asterisk in front of everything we say, but assuming we have a regular preseason and all that, Joe Burrow is not taking a snap in preseason game number 4. And really, all those guys, all the starters, they should be installing the game plan like that same week. So you've got really more than a week to prepare for that first matchup. So Burrow's going to have all this time for that, and then boom, welcome to the NFL. You got to get ready in 3 days for the Browns. So I mean, that's going to be a really quick turnaround. That'll be very interesting. On the road, and in a hostile environment, and on that Thursday night, so there's a lot going on there. And I think, that's a real tone setter to me. If they win that game, if they go 2-0, I'm feeling pretty good. And not that they're going to make a serious runner or anything like that necessarily, but that's setting a pretty good little tone and winning that tough game, the divisional game, that road game in prime time, it's making a point of, hey, this is different. This is not what you're used to.
Right. Two conference wins at that point, one in division, like you said, on the road and in prime time to start your season on a short week. Then you have the longer week to get into week 3. You're feeling pretty good if you get to 2-0.
Yeah. And then you're preparing for a really good opponent in the Eagles the following week too. So, that first month's going to be really interesting. And I think the Eagles are going to be tough. That's the one you'd probably chalk up to a loss, just casually looking at it and being honest with yourself. But if they can, like we already talked about how it's going to be difficult to beat the Browns in week 2. And, if they can come back in week 4 after what's win or loss going to be a difficult game and a challenge, I think, against the Eagles, and be the Jaguars, even though, it's not the best team in their, it's not the best team in their schedule, but that's showing you can come back after having, a tough, emotional, physical game, hopefully, and against the Eagles, and win another one. It's just those situations, and that's what, one of the things we talk about with Burrow is, well, he hasn't been in a lot of tough situations because he had such an incredible year. If this team can show they have the character, the personality, whatever, to be able to overcome some of those things in the first few weeks, it's a really good sign.
And You are the king of the segue, my friend, because that's where I'm going next. The first 4 or 5 games, if you kind of want to dissect the schedule into, I guess, quarters or thirds, the first 4 or 5 games are really interesting as we look at it. And I've pulled that up here for those watching us live here on the video. You see the Chargers start the year, the Browns, you mentioned the Eagles, Matt, then you get into the Jaguars and the Ravens. So to me, as I look at this schedule, there's kind of some ebbs and flows to it. It seems as if there are some winnable games a little bit towards the very beginning of the schedule. Weeks 1, 2, and 4 seem to be of that, especially. 6 seems to be winnable. Then you look, later on, you've got some NFC East matchups that potentially seem to be winnable, as well as AFC East matchup. And then, to me, the last month of it, John, the last month seems to be kind of a gauntlet. But ideally, if the Bengals are going to make a run, if you go ideally and realistically, by the time the bye hits, which is right smack in the middle of the season, where would you feel good about this team being record-wise if they are going to make some sort of late run by the time the bye week hits?
Well, I think someone in the comment section said it perfectly. Like, the first month and the last month are brutal, and there's no way of going around that. And then between weeks 6 through 13 or 12, then you have more winnable games where you can build momentum for a late postseason run. The middle of the season bye week is always good. I think they had that last year as well, even though they were 0-8 last year. But I mean, the Browns, Eagles, and Ravens right there, to me, that's 3 losses. I know we have people in the comment section saying that the Eagles aren't good, and I don't understand that at all. And the Ravens are the kings of the North, and they're still really good. So I don't see them winning those games on the road. So they could be 1-4 to come out the gate. And then you have, from weeks 6 through 12, I believe they play Washington, they play New York, they host the Browns, they go on the road against the Colts. Any of those 4 games, I can see them winning, and they can come back to around maybe 500 by week 9 when they go into the bye, and then say they're at like 4-4 going into week 10 at the Steelers, but a place that they haven't won in 5 years. Last year they got their asses kicked on primetime in that location, and it will be Joe Burrow's first time against the Steelers. So maybe that's the statement game. Maybe that's what tips the scales in terms of how the season's going to play out at by the season's end. Because after that, then you have 2 winnable games at Washington against the Giants, and then you go back to Miami to play the Dolphins, and hopefully have more relaxing game back then. Because at the end of the year, hosting the Cowboys, Steelers Monday night, face the AFC champs and the Texans, and then host the Ravens one more time. Like, if they're in a position to potentially eclipse 500 and maybe push for that final playoff spot, like, that's got to be at least 3 wins right there to be comfortable getting into that setting. But it all depends on how really they respond after that first month, in my opinion, because I don't think the first month is going to be very pretty for them.
This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, joined by Chalk Talk's Matt Minich, one of the esteemed members of our channel, as well as John Sheeran, my co-host on this show and a co-host on Sorry If I Spit When I Speak with Dadio Makdook and Hoji Smoji. You're joining us as we talk about the 2020 NFL schedule, the Bengals schedule that was released Thursday night. We'll also be taking some listener questions. I mentioned at the top of the show, you can get those questions to us in the live chat. Call or text us at our phone number, 949-542-6241. You can email us, theobinsider@gmail.com. Tweet us at BengalsOBI. Or you can leave it in the comment thread on cincyjungle.com in the live thread that we have going there. Matt, personally speaking, I find, aside from the divisional games, of course, I find that I look at the Colts game as particularly interesting. I look at the Miami game as very interesting because it's Tua versus Burrow. Those are a couple of games that really stick out to me as ones that aren't always on the schedule and seem to be very interesting. What are some of the ones that stick out to you as you kind of salivate a little bit thinking about how fun that potential game could be? Or game?
The Eagles game is a little early in the year, but I think that could be interesting because they've got a really good defensive coordinator, even though they don't necessarily have the the players they need over there all the time. But I believe they have made some additions on that side of the ball, Darius Slay and some others. So I think that'll be interesting, and they're gonna have a couple games worth of tape on Burrow at that point. So that could be the first real challenge to somebody who actually knows what we're doing with Burrow. Because obviously the Browns, they're going to have one game in like 2 days to break it down. So that's the first real time you're seeing somewhat of a game plan that's actually about Joe Burrow's offense. Another thing with that is because it's early in the year, I'm not sure, but if they're going to start using Jalen Hurts and put him into a Taysom Hill role, that's a time that we kind of preview what we're going to see from Lamar Jackson or against Lamar Jackson. Obviously they're very different athletes, but I think the quarterback running dynamic that they might try and work in with Hurts, that could be interesting. Could be a nice little warm up to that a couple of weeks before if they do have a 10-play package or something like that going into that. I think the Ravens one it's interesting. We play the Ravens in week 17 with the new playoff format. Because if in week 17, let's say the Chiefs already have the 1 seed and the Ravens can't get it, and the Ravens have already won the division, like, are we playing RG3 that week? So I mean that could be a gimme game. Not. I mean, obviously it's still a good team, but we might not see Lamar Jackson that week. I think that maybe that's something they didn't think about when they changed the schedule, but I kind of feel like that we're going to have some less competitive week 17 games because people aren't competing for that second bye week there. So yeah, those definitely stick out to me. Return of Dalton, whether he's playing or not, that'll be fun. And I think the Colts are a really well coached team too, even with the question mark at quarterback right now. I think they're a very well coached team and a pretty well coached defense. They get a little stagnant, don't change quite as quickly as they should sometimes, but another potential challenge for Joe Burrow there.
I think at the end of the year, you have at least 3 games. If everything goes right, say the Bengals are in the playoff race, Cowboys, Texans, and Ravens. Cowboys didn't win the division, but they should be in contention this year. I think those are potential games that can get flexed too. All on Sunday, late in the year, like if the Ravens, are competing for one of the bye spots at that point, and the Bengals, are still competing for the wild card. That's obviously a flex opportunity. Texans as well. If the Cowboys remain or bounce back this year with Dak, I think that's another thing as well. So it's going to be tough at the end of the year, but if the Bengals are as good as some of us hope that they are, then they're in position to have some meaningful games and then therefore get more primetime games on the docket.
Interesting points by both of you. I didn't really think about the playoff seeding aspect and, some of those other facets that you both raised. If the Bengals, it's interesting what Matt said, if the Bengals happen to be an 8-7 at the end of the year, right? And there's a scrum for a wild card spot or that extra wild card spot, whatever the case may be, is that, are they able to stumble into a spot because of a gimme game at the end of the year because a team like the Ravens may be sitting guys? It's interesting to see how some of those scenarios could play out. I want to go here next, John, and this is from Paris Blair in the live Facebook chat because it's kind of a spin on a question I already had in my mind. What guys do you think? What teams do you guys think are misleading? I'll ask both of you this, but start with you, John. What teams do you think are misleading as a winnable game? And I was going the other way with it. What team do you see as who was maybe a world beater last year or has been a traditional powerhouse that either could be on the downslide this year or the Bengals could sneak past them?
I mean, the teams that he's mentioning, Indianapolis, Los Angeles, Tennessee, and the NFC teams minus Dallas, I don't think Tennessee is a winnable game at all on paper. Like, they beat the Ravens and Patriots last year in the playoffs. I think you could see massive regression from Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry, but that defense is still pretty good, even though they lost Gerald Casey. So until until they are frauds, I don't think you can list them as frauds. And I think that the Bengals should be easily, underdogs in that matchup. The Chargers, it really depends on, how good is Tyrod at that point, because I don't think Herbert's going to start the year, and they might just have the advantage at quarterback, even with a rookie quarterback in Burrow. The Colts is going to depend on how well Rivers is at the end of his career. I think he's in a good situation to make them competitive at the very least, because Ballard and has built that roster pretty well, and like Matt said, they're really well coached. And the NFC East teams, like obviously Philly's competitive, and we talked about that. Washington and New York don't really do anything for me because I'm not confident in their quarterbacks outplaying Burrow at that point. Mostly when I look at these things, the quarterbacks matter the most. And for people who have high hopes for this team, it's rare for rookie quarterbacks to be productive from an above average standpoint, and that's the most important aspect aside from coaching, obviously, that can get your team into competitive situations towards the end of the year. So from a week-to-week standpoint, I look at the quarterbacks more often than not, and that's why a lot of these teams are right now, in terms of Vegas odds, they're projected to have higher win totals than the Bengals, because it's hard to trust rookie quarterbacks to be above average, even if one of them is Joe Burrow. So I think Tennessee's not winnable at this point. I think Indianapolis is going to be a little tougher, and the Chargers really depends on how Tyrod plays.
Matt, I want to give the same question to you, but I want to add a little facet to it. I want to get your thoughts on the Steelers. John and I were talking before we took the air, and props to John. I didn't really look at it this way, but the Bengals haven't beaten the Steelers in like 5 years. They haven't won a game against the Steelers in 5 years. They came close last year, believe it or not. I think with Ryan Finley under center, that was kind of a close game towards the end of the year. And then the Bengals had another couple close ones, if I remember correctly, in 2018. One that really ended up kind of nosediving their season after they had that fun first part of the season in 2018. Ben's back. The Steelers always are competitive. They always play their best ball in December, but there are questions, I think. You never want to count them out. So I guess I along with some of these other games we mentioned, I'd like to also get your thoughts on the Steelers and how you view them this coming year.
I think those games, the second one last year was very close. Obviously, the quarterback situation last year.
For both teams.
The first game, it wasn't close on the scoreboard, but it was just like a couple of big plays the defense gave up. Mm-hmm. And I think so. There's two things with the Bengals that could potentially be a huge change this year. We don't know. All right, number one is Burrow, and that's the most obvious. And we've seen Burrow, so we have the hopes for that to have that quarterback play. But there's been a lot of changes on defense, particularly in the secondary. And if they can just play better assignment football, and just stay on top of deep balls, hold some edges, make tackles, because they give up a lot of big plays. And she's one, there were like two drives, I think, against the Steelers that were like 2 or 3 play drives. They just completed a deep one on us in a coverage that I think Goodberry and I spent a month apiece trying to figure out what the coverage was supposed to be. I think the defense can improve a lot, and I think that's going to be really interesting when it comes down to it. Their defense, which they did a great job of shoring up last year with Minka Fitzpatrick, versus the rookie quarterback, and the Bengals defense versus the Steelers that have given them a lot of trouble. I think Monday Night Football at the end of the year is really interesting because, regardless of what the rest of the year has looked like, because we know things aren't going to be as perfect as we hope they are right now. And I tend to paint a rosy picture, but I realize that not everything's going to go the right way. Burrow's going to throw some picks. They're going to make some mistakes. But beating the Steelers on Monday Night Football, and actually this is weird, but beating the Steelers in Cincinnati, because we know Roethlisberger plays really well in Ohio. that could be. I mean, that's a real statement. Even if it's week 15 and you're out of the playoff picture, doing that on national television, like that really says something. Overall, I think the Steelers. I don't know how great Roethlisberger is right now, and I get that he's put up some numbers in recent years, but especially at the beginning of the year, he's always rough. And there was just a thing recently about basically his training regimen is like walking around and drinking Busch Light or something like that. But I mean, like he doesn't do anything. There was a report out there. I think it was from Jay Glazer.
He looks it, man. He looks like it. Jeez.
And he looks like it in September too. And that's why like every year I'm like, man, he's done. But he always manages to work it out. And they're, to their credit, and I hate to say it, but they are a team that tends to get better over the course of the year. Which unfortunately we got him twice in the last half of the year. So we'll see how long that's going along. But I mean, he's coming off an injury and he's not getting any younger. I do, however, think the way that team is built, and I think, John might jump down my throat a little bit for this one, but I think that team is built the right way. And I think that team can win games without good quarterback play. And I think Minka sealed up the defense so they can do that. They're a little, not quite as good as they used to be on the offensive line. It is admittedly an unreliable way, and there's a lot more factors, a lot more injuries that could come up by that point that could sink it. But I think the way they're built, they can survive even if even if they're not getting great play out of the quarterback.
I mean, crap. They went 8-8 with some guy named Duck Hodges as the quarterback from last time. So, they're definitely built for it. And I think the addition of Minka, really, you talked about this on Twitter the other day. The addition of Minka Fitzpatrick in that defense really made that defense, and it just carried the quarterbacks. And it's not sustainable, but it definitely is possible because of just how they're structured.
Before we get to our win-loss predictions, if we want to give them way too early, and I already put mine out there, and I'll share mine first. I'll be the sacrificial lamb on that front. But before we get to that, I mean, obviously, I want to talk about expectations and what can be considered a successful season in terms of a win-loss record. If you want to go, specific games to win and all of that, fine. But look, there is a wide view as to where this team will finish in terms of where people sit right now. They look at the schedule now. They see how it's laid out. They see what the team did this offseason, see what they did last year, and they're making their predictions. I've seen a lot of 4-12s. I'm seeing 5-11s in the live chat. I see 8-8s. I see upwards of 9-7, 10-6, all over the map. I think we can all agree that we're not going to be in line for a 2-14 season. I think that's fair to say. But I'll start with you again, John. In terms of what would be a big step in progress, what would be something that we can feel good about as fans as a finish to the season? Obviously, 10 wins, playoffs, all that stuff, that would be great. I'm talking more, is 6 wins something that would be a positive? Is 7 wins? Is 8 wins? What do you think is kind of like, hey, we can feel pretty good if the Bengals finish here, even if it means no playoffs?
Anything over 4 wins, in my opinion, is success relative to who they are and what they did last year. Obviously, they're not preparing for the season to say, hey, if we win 5 wins, we're going to be happy. That's not how obviously teams operate.
Right.
That's not how coaches do this stuff. They're in line to regress positively based off last year. They were 0-8 in 1-score games. They had a crap ton of injuries, but I guess that's just never going to not be a thing with the Bengals until it isn't. But they're in line to be a little bit luckier this year. They're in line to have better quarterback play, even though it may be a little variable bait because he is a rookie. And they do have plenty of winnable games on the schedule based on how we expect those teams to play out. Anywhere in that 5-8 range, I think is reasonable, and I think it is a sign of growth. I think if you expect anything more than that, you're just letting yourself get disappointed towards the end.
Matt?
I go a little higher than that because I think there's a few games in there that there's going to be some bad teams, and it's hard to know for sure who they are right now. But I the Redskins and the Dolphins might be okay by that time of the year. With some changes they made off the field and on the field in those groups. But I mean, there's going to be a couple of teams that aren't very good. But then you've got to show you can win some of these tough games too. I think I want to at least split with everybody in the division. That's going to be really hard with the Ravens. But I'd feel much better if they could somehow pull one off against the Ravens. So I don't know. I think I'm feeling okay with like maybe 6. But I think this team has the ability this year to be in that 500 range. I could see them sneak into 8 or 9, but I think 6, 7 is a reasonable hope. Yes, won't quite put expectation on it, I guess, but because and again, if it is like 4 and they're doing some things, I want to see them beat a good team. I want to see them put together a good game plan. I want to see them adjust in game. I want to see Burrow. I want to see them go into a tough environment and win, or just come back from tough odds in certain situations. You know what I mean? I think it's more about how they react to the things that happen over the course of the year.
And I think, honestly, people are comparing this season to the 2011 season when they had a rookie and quarterback and they had a crazy offseason with the lockout. They went 9-7, and I just don't think that's a reasonable expectation. In all honesty, Andy Dalton was a below-average quarterback that year when you look at the metrics that matter. And, A.J. Green's impact was obviously immense, and that's kind of what the offense went through along with Cedric Benson. But, I don't think Andy Dalton's season that year is doing Joe Burrow any favors this year. If that's the expectation because it happened before, that it can happen again, and people are equating that Burrow's a better quarterback than Andy Dalton, I just think that's really faulty logic, and I think it's setting people up for eventual disappointment. That year in 2011, they won a lot of close games. They lost a couple close games as well, but it shouldn't be the expectation just because it happened 10 years ago.
Oh, sure. No, absolutely. And everything's different. And the league is different now. It's a different game now. But to me, like 9-7, like that's a ceiling for me. Like I wouldn't be absolutely shocked by it, but we're getting some good breaks, and a lot of these moves are panning out even better than expected.
Here's an interesting facet that we kind of keep forgetting, or at least I do. Kentucky Ron says 8 or 9 games were 1-score losses last year. That is an interesting facet to note. How that translates to net this coming year, we'll see. But the Bengals, with Ryan Finley and others in the lineup, they actually had quite a few games that were very close, and or even some of the ones that were 10-point games. I look back to the Jacksonville game. That game was pretty tight for a while, even though that wasn't a 1-score game. So there's a lot of that stuff, but you could say that really about a lot of teams every year. I think a 6 to 8 win season, technically you have anywhere from 3 to 4 times the amount of wins you had last year. I think that is a successful season in year 1 of the Joe Burrow era. And I keep kind of dreaming about the 2003 season. You guys keep talking about 2011. I keep thinking about 2003 when Marvin Lewis first came in. They had John Kitna, and they kind of started a little slow and got hot. Almost made the playoffs. They were in it to the very last game, and they lost against the Browns to get themselves out of it. But that was a really fun year. To me, if they have fun, if they show progression, and they're able to win some of these games that have traditionally been very frustrating in terms of primetime venues, that sort of thing. Even if they finish with 6 or 7 wins and they win some of those games, they have some of those under their belt, I think that could be construed as a successful season, even though they don't make the postseason. So here's what I did, guys, because I am just so brilliant. I am sharing the wins and loss, a very early wins-loss prediction that I did that is on our comment thread. By the way, get your questions in. We're going to get to a few of those towards the end here. But before that, it's all I went through the games and just kind of did a brief synopsis, win-loss type of situation. So I had week 1 win against the Chargers, week 2 loss against the at Browns on Thursday night, loss against Philly in week 3, win against Jacksonville 2-2, Ravens a loss in Baltimore, 2-3. Week 6, I had a win against Indy, 3-3. Week 7, a win against the Browns in Cleveland, at home, 4-3. A loss at home against the Titans, so they're 4-4. They're 500 at the bye. A loss against the Steelers, 4-5. A win at Washington to get back to 5-5. A win, kind of a little bit of a streak here. A win against the Giants, 6-5. A win at Miami, 7-6. And then I had them hitting a big skid at the end here. 4 straight losses against the Cowboys, Steelers, Texans, and Ravens to get to 7-9. That's what I had. Where do you guys have yours? And I'll start with you, Matt. Real putting you on the spot. Early prediction based on what you've seen from the team this offseason and how the schedule played out.
Can you go back to the screen with the full schedule on it?
Sure.
So I don't screw this up.
No, I got you. Give me a sec here. Week 1, you can start with week 1 is the
I almost said San Diego, but yeah, the Chargers.
That's all right. The other day I was talking about the Raiders and I still said Oakland and someone had
that's gonna be a really tough
Yeah,
one. Every time somebody says Las Vegas, I'm like, what?
Yeah, I'm pulling that up for you. Give me 1 sec. And
all right, so the Chargers, I think that's a win. I think when you look at the quarterback situation between the two teams, I mean, it's probably going to be Tyrod at that point. I think Tyrod's going to be tougher than Herbert at that point in the year. I not that negative on Herbert's career, but I think Herbert's going to throw some picks and make some mistakes early on. So either way, regardless of who's at quarterback, I like the win there. Then the short week, Browns on Thursday night. We're gonna see between two coaching staffs, that there are some question marks about who can get it done there. I'm gonna go with the Bengals in that one though. Eagles week 3, that's gonna be a loss. Jaguars, I think they'll pull off the win against the Jaguars. And then, I mean, you talk about the ebbs and flows. I think this run's gonna be tough. So Ravens will be a loss. Colts, I think it'd be a loss. As much as I'd like to say they're going to sweep the Browns, I'm gonna take that one as a loss too, and the Titans. So that's a big swing. So that gets it to 3-5, and a 4-game losing streak going into the bye, which really sets up something interesting here. Because I think the Titans are going to be a tough game regardless. You're going to have the bye. What are they doing game planning with extra time going or having Pittsburgh come to them for week 10? So that's an interesting one as well. I like the Bengals on that one with the extra week to prepare. So that gets us to 4 wins. And then it's could go on a nice little stretch here. Also coming off a tear like that lost all those games. Burrow particularly, but really everybody to kind of keep it together and get the win coming off the bye after a lot of disappointment there. That would be huge. So that gets us to presumably a fairly easy stretch with the Redskins, Giants, and Dolphins. I'm going to say that the rookie coach in Washington is going to pull one off. I think by that point we might actually. We're not. Never mind. Not a great record, but so I'll give it to the Redskins there. I'll take the Giants and the Dolphins as wins. So that's 6. Cowboys would be a loss, I believe. Pittsburgh, Monday Night Football. Already got them once. I don't think it's going to happen twice. So still at 6 wins. Houston Texans. Is this the year the wheel falls off for them? Like Bill O'Brien, the GM, keeps screwing up so bad, but Bill O'Brien, the coach, manages to get him to the playoffs every year.
Bill O'Brien, the dictator.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna take the win there. So that puts it 7, and then we'll say a loss to the Ravens. So 7-9.
Okay.
We got Antoine Malone Jr. in the comments section. If we win less than 9 games, I will give someone my house, car, and wife when I find one. I think we already have Kentucky Ron taking action on that. Vegas has them at 5.5 wins, so you might want to adjust that over under right there. I mean, seven wins sounds
like didn't Peyton Manning like set a record for most interceptions in a season his rookie year? And I mean, like it's a different game and they're different guys, but like Burrow can have some struggles, and he was just okay his first year at LSU. Obviously, the offense changed and things like that, but sometimes it takes a little while to get your feet under you. And this kind of parallels. I'm sorry, I cut you off there, John. But this kind of parallels his first year at LSU because he was still graduating from Ohio State. He didn't have spring ball going to that first year, so all he had was camp. And Burrow is. We're not going to have any OTAs. It looks like all he's going to have is camp, maybe a shortened camp. So it just might be a little bit slow, and that doesn't mean he's not going to be the dude we all want him to be. But expecting him to be a world beater right now is rough.
All I've been doing for the past 2 days has been going through, expected points added per play, PFF grade, QBR, completion percentage above expectation, combining all those metrics into one aggregate ranking for quarterbacks in the season. You look at the rookies who finished in the top half of the league. It's Dak Prescott, and then you have to go all the way back to Russell Wilson, RG3, and Andrew Luck. That's just of this decade. Like good, above average rookie quarterback performances are rare, especially even in an era where the passing game has exploded exponentially. So if Burrow doesn't do that well this year, it's not a sign of concern. It's just him fitting in with the norm of the reality of rookie quarterback play. So it's tough for me to say that a rookie quarterback is going to lead a team to more than 8 wins, especially in the schedule where I think it's ranked the 10th toughest according to just predicted wins losses from Vegas. Looking through the entire schedule, again, Washington, New York, they don't really scare anybody. I think the Colts and the Chargers are also completely winnable games there. That's already 4 wins that I'd be comfortable in. That's in 4 wins based off last year. That's improvement. A 2-win improvement is still fitting in with the narrative of teams that are unlucky one year tend to be more lucky the next year. That's still in line for improvement and progression. Anything beyond that, when you get into the 6, 7, 8 win range, you leave more up to doubt because you're facing tougher teams. And like I did this last year. I went through the entire schedule. I had them at 7-9. I got ripped for it, and they finished 2-14. So like we just don't know anything right now. We didn't know anything in August or September last year. We certainly don't know anything in May. High expectations are fun, and I think we just all need them right now because we don't even know when the season's going to freaking start. But also, we just have to look at the things that we do know based off of history, and that leads me to believe anywhere between 5 and 8. I'll go 6-10 for the hell of it.
All right, so 2 7-9s and a 6-10 from John Sheeran as our predictions as we sit here right now. Obviously, injuries and all kinds of stuff play into that, but that's our early predictions. We're going to get out of here in just a few minutes. Before we do, we're going to get to some listener questions. Get yours into us, 949-542-6241, call or text. You can get us on Twitter at Bengals OBI. If you are in the live chats, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube, hit us up with a question there. I saw a couple, and maybe you guys, if you keep your eyes peeled on some of that, we can pick out something there. And obviously, we'll be monitoring the comment section on the Cincy Jungle thread. We do, guys, have a caller on the line, and it is Terrell, our good friend Terrell. How you doing, buddy? Terrell, how are you, buddy?
Yes. How you guys doing?
Doing good. Good to hear from you. Been a while.
Oh yeah, I know, but y'all guys have been great, man. Just the whole draft thing, just been building up with everything. Y'all guys have been on point, great. Everybody in the whole black and orange, everything just been great for real. But I just wanted to say that they hit us with the toughest schedule though, for real. They act like Barrow won the Super Bowl. For real, like that was kind of crazy though. But another thing though, a lot of people, a lot of people keep going back and forth. It's either Davis Gaither or Beasley is gonna be the 1-2 that's gonna be the ones that's gonna be the great linebackers for the wholesale. And then I just hope that the free agents do good for us, and Burrow, if he at least win the playoff game between his rookie year, my question is for you is, if he win the playoff game in his rookie year with the 5 straight that Dalton did with that crush tag, that's what I want to ask you, man. And I just hope Mixon get his money, and I just let y'all handle that.
All right, thanks, Terrell. Appreciate it. If Joe Burrow wins a playoff game in his first season, I think you build a freaking statue, personally. But look, I think what he was saying, does the one playoff win in just 1 year from Burrow, does that trump what Andy Dalton did in the 5 straight postseason appearances with the Bengals and the couple of division crowns that were in there? Interesting kind of hypothetical. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that.
I mean, it shuts people up. We're not going to be talking about the Bengals that can't win a playoff game anymore. So, I mean, it's something.
I mean, shit. That won't just be Burrow winning a playoff game in his rookie year. That'll be Zach Taylor winning a playoff game in his second year as a coach, doing something that Marvin Lewis never did in 16 years. So that's a double whammy there. If they make the playoffs, it's exceeding all reasonable expectations, and if they win a playoff game, it's like the most successful season I think you can rationally expect from this team. So that would be impressive.
I mean, and going back to like what I was saying about the Ravens before, so if they sneak into the playoffs, they're playing the second best team in the AFC.
Yeah,
like that last spot, you're playing somebody who's really good. So yeah, I mean it's probably the Ravens again, or maybe it's the Chiefs if the Ravens win 14 games or something. So that's really something, because you got to think about what that matchup's going to be too.
That's so weird how they're doing the playoff rules this year, but they're waiting a year for the 17. What was it? Or is it?
They have between 2021 and 2023 the owners can elect to add the extra game.
Right. Yeah.
But I guess it's because there's like a lot more to work out with that, like who gets the extra home game and like which direct. I think they're going to bump the schedule back and take off a preseason game, but I guess there's a lot more like logistics with that than just adding one more game.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk, because Terrell brought it up, and also Josh Cook, I think earlier brought it up. Maybe it was somebody else in the live chat. Basically, it was Josh Cook. What if Joe Mixon holds out, John? What is the contingency plan? How less viable and effective does it make that Bengals offense with Joe Burrow under center?
Joe Mixon is objectively a better running back than any other running back that the Bengals have on their roster. I don't think anybody's arguing that. The value of having Joe Mixon out there compared to a rotation of Giovanni Bernard, Rodney Anderson, Travion Williams, or even Jacques Patrick, if he somehow makes the team, it's not as different as many people want to say it is. And obviously, Mixon does things better than all those guys. But in terms of actually winning football games, it's not going to be a situation that Mixon wants to find himself in. I don't like, regardless if Mixon does play or doesn't, they can go 1-4, and if he misses those games and they go 1-4, fans are going to turn to the front office and say, "Pay this guy. He's the reason why they're losing." And in all likelihood, it's probably not going to be the case. I don't think he's going to end up holding out. I think ultimately he's going to sign an extension. Everyone's going to be happy, but if they do struggle early on, it's probably not going to be because of Joe Mixon. It's probably going to be more for the more important factors that make up winning football games.
Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I don't know. It was an old Bill Walsh thing. The last position, like you really want to focus on when you've got everything else, is when you get a top flight receiver, and I kind of feel like it's that way about running back now. Like, and look at the Chiefs. That's exactly what the Chiefs did. Like the Chiefs won a Super Bowl, and now they're going to be really good with Clyde Edwards-Helaire next year. But what impact does Clyde Edwards-Helaire have on the Tampa Bay? Well, that's a bad example. They had Tom Brady, but like on somebody else that was choosing the top 10. What does Edwards-Helaire do for that team? I think running backs can push you over that edge. And I think, I think Ezekiel Elliott does have a lot of value to the Cowboys because the Cowboys should be a very competitive team. And Ezekiel Elliott is actually a great comparison for Joe Mixon because they are both painfully underused in the passing game for what their ability is in the passing game. But even like just having that type of runner, I think can push you over the edge, but it can't get you to where you need to be in the first place.
Right.
John Paris Blair, Facebook here says, give a breakout player or a couple. Who are some breakout players for you?
So he's mentioning, I'm looking at his comment, Auden Tate, CJ Uzoma, Darius Phillips. It might be a little late for Uzoma to truly break out. I think who he is now is who we can expect him to be. It like Auden Tate, maybe, even though he's your fourth or fifth guy. It depends on your expectations there. Darius Phillips, depending on injuries, could see a bigger role. I'm gonna go off script here and a guy that he didn't mention, Renell Wren, because I think it's gonna be interesting to see if they use him as a quote unquote starter when they're in their 3-4 sets at 5 technique. I know they played him a lot, sort of in that position, and he was kind of drafted. We thought he was kind of drafted more as a nose tackle, but maybe they put Tupou at nose tackle behind DJ Reader, give him more rotation, and give Renell Wren an increased role because he started playing a little bit better towards the end of last year, and maybe he takes 300, 400 snaps in that role, in a role that fits his body type and his strengths. So I'm going to say Renell Wren is a underrated breakout candidate.
Rel Phoenix says Drew Sample. That's an interesting one. What about you, Matt?
I like the Wren pick, and I honestly, I'll give you full credit because I wouldn't have thought of it. But the other thing about him is he's pretty athletic. Mm-hmm. Like in college, they had him on the move all the time. So I think you can get into that 3-4 defense and have a guy who you can still run crazy pass rush stunts even with that personnel on the field. And we see that where because of the way the league is and how they do things, like you're going to get caught with that personnel and they're going to spread everybody out and Hubbard's going to have to cover a slot. So now being able to have a guy like Wren who can, who can stunt, who I think can get after the quarterback a little bit. That'd be interesting. Looking at the guys that were talked about, I don't know. With everything going on this roster, I think if Tate's a breakout player, it's very bad news for AJ Green and John Ross. Probably those guys probably didn't make it very far. I think in that group though, I think it really could be Tyler Boyd, and that sounds a little weird because like we all talk about him and we know how good he is, but the more I think about it, like, and how much Joe Burrow loves throwing, deep digs over the middle, and I mean, I think he can fit into that role. And I don't like people talk about like give a guy a tight end, give a young quarterback a tight end. That's not how this offense is set up. I think that Justin Jefferson was the security blanket at LSU, and I think Tyler Boyd's the guy that's going to be running most of those routes. So I think that Tyler Boyd might be the number one receiver at the end of the year. So we'll take that for a hot take, I guess. And I guess that's what it would have to be to call it a breakout for him. I think you might be looking at it and saying he's the guy on this team at the end of the year, just because he's such a great fit with Burrow. Now, at the same time, and you look at Larry Fitzgerald. As Larry Fitzgerald got older, and then he got into a different system. He started playing him more as a big slot. That kind of helped his career keep going. So maybe that's what AJ's future is, and maybe that's what justifies the extension he's going to get, is fitting a little bit more into that role. But at the same time, we need people to push the boundaries on the outside, and you can't trust Ross right now for speed, so you got to have somebody who can separate a little bit on the outside to open up some of those other things.
And maybe that's like their expectation, that they expect Boyd to grow into that role, and maybe that's why we don't see an AJ Green extension. Maybe they want to see Boyd ascend to that status and be that, essentially the number one in this offense, even though he's not an X like AJ Green. Maybe that's their expectation, and they expect him to gel more with Burrow than Green. That's a great point that I never even realized.
Yeah, and Boyd, a lot of people think he could be I think you may have mentioned it, Matt, the kind of Justin Jefferson piece to, kind of move him around, do some effective things around in the offense.
Can I flip this question on you guys?
Yeah.
All right. So I was just thinking about this the other day. I'm glad to have somebody to talk about, because I'm usually alone on my show. But
you're talking to the wall. Yeah.
So let's say, right now, Ross and Green don't have contracts past the year. I think the expectation and the beat guys and the guys that are connected seem to think that an AJ extension is in the works. But let's say you go into this year, John Ross plays 14 games and he's like 800 plus yards receiving, and AJ Green is the one that struggles to stay on the field. Are you extending Ross? I mean, we're counting him out as gone because they didn't give him the extension, but I mean, to me, if you can't let both of them go, I mean, if you do let both of them go, you got a problem. You got to find somebody else, and maybe it doesn't have to be a top draft pick or something, but you need a third. I mean, unless that guy's right about Auden Tate, But yeah, I mean, so if Ross can stay mostly healthy all year and be productive, and AJ is the one struggling, do you extend John Ross?
Anthony, I'm going to you first.
Thanks. Appreciate that. First of all, I don't think they'll lose both of them. I think they will be wise enough to realize that they can't do that. I think, oddly enough, though, some stuff that came out today on Friday, they were saying, some beat writers were saying that they feel that the Bengals may play it out with AJ for this year, and they may wait. He may not get that extension in the offseason. I think from a PR standpoint, and they'll probably come to a deal with AJ and let John Ross walk. That's my personal opinion, regardless, unless Ross, has like you said, like an 1,000-yard season and multiple touchdowns, and he's showing finally there he is. That's the guy. But at this point, I think they're gonna stick with AJ, and I think they made a pretty concerted. They sent a message saying that the Ross thing is done, and we'll try and hang on to Green if it makes sense. That's just my opinion. I think that's regardless of what occurs this season.
In my mind, that's like their best case scenario. Whereas they can, I'm kind of with Anthony here. I don't think, like, if Ross has a year that we all want him to have, I think they love that, because it becomes a Tyler Eifert situation where he can go off and get a contract that he's earned. It's just the point where they probably just don't trust him to replicate that because of the first 3 years.
Sure.
And if AJ Green doesn't do that well and they don't give him an extension by July 15th, he becomes more reasonable to bring back, especially because now he's a year older. I'm kind of with Anthony, whereas I think if there's a gun to my head and I had to guess one's coming back regardless, I think it's just Green. But this is also the team that let Mohamed Sanu and Marvin Jones go in the same year, so really nothing's off the table.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see there being. I could see there being an AJ Green extension before the season starts. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, but yeah, just with the situation with both of them, and then like AJ's older too, so like if you get to the point where you don't think you can trust AJ because something else happens this year that he doesn't play in half the games or something. It's like that's when it gets interesting to me, but we'll see. If they seal him up before the season, then then we're stuck anyway. So
yeah, I mean, it'd be great to have that problem if you're the Bengals.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that means obviously your offense has been successful. It's just it's a lot of ifs, and it would take a massive step forward, even just from a health standpoint, for Ross to be able to give you that kind of thing. And ironically, John and I have talked about this a little bit. It's kind of funny because in the Rams system, Ross was kind of in that mold of the receivers that McVay and Zach Taylor like to use, the smaller, fast, yards after the catch guys in the form of Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, that sort of thing. Yet the Bengals and Zach Taylor, even though they didn't draft Auden Tate, they seem to like him. They seem to want to keep AJ Green in his immense size. They drafted T. Higgins in his immense size. it just, there's a little bit of a dichotomy there in terms of how the Rams offense was kind of used and the players that they use there and who the Bengals are bringing in and who Zach Taylor is using here. You know, I think AJ Green still has a lot in the tank. I really do. It's just a matter of him being on the field. It's not like, I don't think he's washed up. I don't think he's going to be ineffective. I think if he's on the field, he's that star guy and he keeps in immense shape. I think these things that have been plaguing him have been just kind of freak deals. And, you know, I still see a handful of productive years out of him personally, whether that's here or elsewhere. I still think he could be a productive guy.
Yeah, I can definitely see it. I'm with you on that. And I was somebody last year. I was like, he's not really injury prone. And then, of course, he gets hurt in the first day of camp. And it's like, man.
Yeah. Let's get on out of here, guys. We've gone a little longer than we thought, but it's been good. We broke down the schedule, took a handful of questions. We wanted to get to more, but we're kind of strapped for time here. We appreciate everyone tuning in and submitting their questions to us. We did get some good ones that unfortunately we just did not get on the air, but keep those coming to us. Even if you get those to us at another time, where we're not on the air, we still like to hang on to a lot of those and answer them on the air. So keep those coming to us. Keep it to CincyJungle.com for all the news, opinions, analysis, breaking news, all that good stuff. Keep it to our podcast channel, Matt Minich to, I don't know, would be that side, right? Yeah, Matt does his Chalk Talk episodes on our YouTube channel, which have been getting rave reviews from a number of our fans. And he does some other standalone podcast episodes with some interviews, great stuff there. John and I do our weekly show along with some of these listener questions, special interview episodes, etc. So keep it to our program. Sorry if I spit when I speak with Dadio Makdook and Hoji Smoji, as well as the boys Ace, Boogie, and Zim Hude. Orange is the New Black. They've recently had TJ Hushmanzada and Jeff Blake on their program. Pretty cool stuff there, and I guess they've got even more lined up. So we are working on getting interviews across the channel on all of our different programs. So keep it tuned there. Thanks for all of your support. Because of your support, I mentioned this on our weekly show. This channel, this program has been a top football iTunes downloaded channel. So we can't thank you enough. Leave us some reviews. Subscribe to our podcast channel so you don't miss an episode, whether it's live or after the fact. Thanks for the support. Matt, thanks, buddy. Appreciate you jumping on. John, same to you, my friend. Have a good weekend, guys. Have a good week.